3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Go StarLink.
SpaceX is ramping up the pace of rocket launches in order to conquer the internet from space. The company has launched more than 1,000 satellites to build a network called StarLink, aimed at bringing faster connections to billions of people. Meanwhile, China has launched only a few test satellites. But the country has sent what it calls the world's first 6G satellite, which it says would provide faster service than what's available on Earth. The satellite internet market is expected to be worth more than $400 billion by 2040.
The world seems to have an insatiable appetite for bandwidth.
And this competition is taking place in an area known as low Earth orbit, and that comes with privacy and security concerns. Still, SpaceX is moving ahead with a larger fleet of satellites, while the relative newcomer China is betting on faster speeds to build a powerful internet network in space. Satellite-based internet is actually not new. Since the mid-1990s, people who live in remote areas and don't have access to cell towers have relied on satellites. These satellites are in orbit about 22,000 miles away from Earth, and a result of that distance is slow speed. Because China's satellites and the StarLink network are closer to Earth, that means they can provide much faster services. SpaceX is currently promising its beta test customers in the US speeds between 50 and 150 megabits per second. That's still below the country's average broadband service on the ground. China has not rolled out its service yet or demonstrated how its satellite works, but the university that developed the 6G satellite says it could offer speeds that can potentially reach at least 1 terabyte per second. That means if you download a 1 gigabyte movie with Starlink service, it would take about 10 seconds. But with the 6G speed that China promises, you could download about 1,000 movies in just 1 second. China says its 6G plan is an extension of its 5G network, which has already been rolled out in many Chinese cities. This technological progression is starting to help transform the country's economy. Namrata Goswami is an independent researcher who's been studying global space policy for more than 20 years. And she says China's 6G satellite network could make a big impact once it's up and running. But SpaceX has an edge over China in another way. That's because SpaceX runs its own supply chain to produce the satellites and handles everything else from launching to operating them. It's taken the company 3 years to plot a constellation of more than 1,000 satellites, planning to eventually deploy a total of 12,000. And that global plan could help more than 3 billion people in the world who don't have regular access to the internet.
Will serve the hardest to serve customers.
After an installation cost of about $600, the monthly fee to use Starlink satellites would be about $100. SpaceX says it's already received 500,000 pre-orders for its service. And the company's plans for expansion could get a boost from the US government, as it recently won preliminary rights to nearly $900 million in subsidies.
6, 5.
But SpaceX's bid for funds and its prolific launches have started to draw criticism from rivals in the US and Europe, who say Starlink satellites are crowding orbit and endangering other satellites. So some are asking regulators to clamp down on the SpaceX project. The company didn't respond to a request for comment. China could also face similar pushback from rivals since it also plans to launch more than 10,000 satellites. But this mega plan has one strong ally. But big networks of satellites also generate a lot of personal data. For example, US officials have long said Beijing could direct Chinese telecom companies like Huawei, which have set up 5G networks abroad, to spy or sabotage. Huawei and the Chinese government have rejected the charges. But Goswami says China's 6G network could open up similar concerns.
Chinese law makes it mandatory for any company or citizen to collaborate with Chinese intelligence in case such a request is made.
But in the US, the legal system could provide a level of protection. SpaceX didn't respond to a request for comment, while China's foreign ministry said that Chinese law protects data security and personal information of citizens and organizations. For now, SpaceX is moving ahead by seeking permission for another 30,000 satellites. But China's network could have one more advantage when it's ready.
China can always make it mandatory for its citizens to have that kind of service in its devices,
making the world's most populated country a place to continue testing the service and honing the technology.